Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Peccadillo Sofa Club, looking at the film in from the side. I am Andrew Henderson. I'm going to be this evening. I work as a sports reporter, and I am part of the sports media LGBT network group. And I also run a website called Pride of the Terraces, which is all about sharing LGBT stories in sport, which ties in really nicely with something like In From the Side, which is why I've been asked to do it. We've got a great panel of guests discussing the film here with us this evening. I'm going to bring in first one of the writers of the film, Adam Silver, who is joining us all the way from Argentina, I believe. Thanks, Adam, for making the effort to do that.
Thanks for having us.
How are you getting on?
Very well. Very well. It's beautiful weather here. The sun's out all the time. I'm going well.
Good.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm in the north of Scotland, so the weather isn't quite as nice, but I'm only slightly jealous. And of course, we couldn't talk about In From the Side without the other co-writer of the film, as well as the co-producer, I think just outright director. He did so many different things in the film. We're going to get onto that in just a little bit. We've got Matt Carter here as well. Matt, how are you getting on?
Good, thank you.
Good. Well, great to have you both with us. I'm assuming most people will have seen the film before they're tuning into this to watch us talk about it. Just in case they haven't, I think we should throw to the film's trailer, just so we all have a good idea of what we're dealing with.
Well, that was a tough game. I think I'm going to be walking funny for a few days after that. Now, for man of the match, well done, Mark Newton.
Are you in the A squad? I saw you at the clubhouse earlier, but I've not seen you around before.
Yeah, I've been out for a while with an injury. I'm Warren.
Everything all right?
I have a boyfriend. He's in my team.
So take a breath and feel your hand in mine, 'cause I'm by your side.
What are you doing this week? I want to take you out.
You're unbelievable.
Oh, John, these are my teammates. This is Pinky and Mark. Mark, I'm John. This is Warren, my partner.
Oh, you're gonna be trouble.
For years, we fought tooth and nail to get the recognition and the respect that we now have as a serious club, not some novelty act. I won't go back to that.
You think I like having to hide this from everyone we know while I watch you parade around with it?
It's not the same.
Like, what is it you want from me? I loved you.
I hated rugby in school. Did you know that? Then I met all of you boys. It was like finding a family.
This isn't fair.
No, it isn't.
Breaking all the rules. Not doing so well, are we?
There's so much drama in that. I love it so much. The two of you must be, so used to seeing that, but so excited at seeing the trailer too. And does it still have an effect on both of you?
Yeah, I'm still smiling watching it just there. It's great, It's just, this whole thing's just a crazy whirlwind. That's it never gets old.
You can't quite believe that what's happening, because all those years ago when we started writing it, it's just like, oh my God, now there's a trailer. Oh my God, now it's in cinemas. Everything's like, oh my God. So yeah, not quite over it yet.
Well, I wanted to take you right back to those early days to start with. And I know, Matt, you've got a background in rugby. That's obviously a very major part of the film. What was the inspiration for sort of starting to put the pieces together to write and create In From the Side?
So I think, just a preface, I've been involved with inclusive rugby now for about 8 years. It's something that kind of was a really big part of my life for a very long time. It still is, I still coach and I still play. I've just got back into playing again now, actually. But and I pitched to Adam. I've worked with Adam before on a previous sort of short film that I put out there, and we sort of became friends. And I said, I've got this really good idea. Well, I thought it was a good idea for a forbidden romance story set in the sort of inclusive gay rugby world. And Adam said, let's talk about this. Let's have a conversation and let's sort of develop this. And I said, I'd love to write this with you. And that started the journey of the writing process really. And it was quite a nice sort of collaboration because Adam knows, and he's very proud of this, that he knows almost nothing about rugby, but that was actually quite good, because then he kind of represents the audience that probably won't understand anything about the rugby. And that way we kept a balance of this, the pushing and pulling on the rugby elements and making sure it was a palatable story that kind of would appeal to everyone, really. But yeah,
I still barely understand rugby.
Yeah, I know. It's just dismays me to no end. Anyway,
I was going to ask if Adam had any sort of background in rugby, because I didn't know if you did or not. But how was that then to be thrown into that world and suddenly be writing a movie about it?
I mean, it was awesome. But I mean, Matt was guiding the whole, everything rugby related. Matt was guiding it all. So it was great. I mean, just handed over the reins to him. I mean, all the experience that he had. And sort of just, I was inputting on all the other stuff, but I certainly wouldn't claim to have to have any say over any of the rugby stuff in the film. But the whole world was fascinating. This sort of family environment, this huge community of characters. It was great to write from that springboard. So yeah, it was exciting.
I guess those are things, whether you're a fan of rugby or not, that you can really sink your teeth into as a writer, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, their universal themes as well. I mean, it does take place in the rugby world, but in any small group of people, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of conflict and romance. So, it was a great springboard, and yeah, it sort of manifested itself from there.
So and I guess either of you can come in on this, when did you start to realize, okay, we've got something here. This is what we think it's going to look like. This is actually going to work?
I mean, I'll say from the beginning, I was a true believer from the start. But I think, even for me, the way it's taken off, I don't think even in my wildest dreams we would have thought it would have been received as well as it had, and it would sort of had the life that it's had after we sort of finished making it. But I thought when writing it, I mean, Adam and I had a very sort of strict idea at the start that we wanted to make a film that had no homophobia and no coming out storylines. And I think because we hadn't seen a great deal of films that kind of, explore other subject matter that aren't bogged down by those sort of themes. Obviously, they're very important themes, but they're being told by many people. But to write something about the other stuff and to not have that, weighing the story down was quite exciting. And I think from that point, I think we're on something interesting here with just that alone. And then the mix of having this sort of forbidden love story that doesn't stem from the homophobia of coming out, because these characters, can't be together for other reasons that are sort of, a bit more, nuanced, interesting to explore. And I thought this would work kind of early on, but like I said, who knew what would have happened at the end? We
had a great time. We had a great time writing it. We had a lot of laughs. We had a lot of Thai food. A lot of really late nights. We started writing it when we started writing. I was in Australia and Matt was in the UK, and we just sent each other's pages and rewrite each other's stuff and come back that way. And then we came back to London and we sort of got together and that was all that. But it was an intense process, but incredibly rewarding when we got to the into the nub of the characters and stuff. It felt really joyful a lot of the time, actually, getting to know these guys.
It was a really fun process, and I think actually we argued a lot, but I think that was actually really good in the sense that we would fight over story elements, and it meant the best ideas would float to the top and the weakest ideas would get sort of sieved out, and it allowed us to really sort of refine that script down. But it was an absolute joy working with Adam. There's a point in every evening, usually about 11 o'clock, where we just completely break down and start laughing. We couldn't stop. It would be like that almost every session, and we go, okay, we've reached that point in the evening again, and it was just hilarious in the process, really.
I'd always come over at 6 p.m. and I thought, okay, tonight we're going to get really, we're really going to get going. We're going to get all this stuff we wanted to get done. We're going to be done by 9 p.m. And then I was like, oh my god, the last train's about to leave. Still I make it every time.
Well, I'm glad you say you enjoyed that process, because it would have been really awkward if we had the two of you on talking about this and you turned out to hate each other by the end of it. So, I mean, that's a good starting point.
We've known each other. We have a love-hate relationship in the best way possible. But I mean, we've known each other long enough that we knew what we were getting into with each other when we sort of started this process, and so it was. We knew it was going to be a good sort of collaboration, really.
But I guess one area where the film wasn't on such sure footing from the start was the funding element of it. I know you didn't have a massive budget at all. You used some crowdfunding as well to get it made in the first place, didn't you?
Yes, we did indeed. I mean, we used a Kickstarter, which for anyone considering doing Kickstarter is a lot more work than you realise. As we know, we've just managed to fulfil a lot of the orders that we, the perks and things that we offered to people. But it's a lot of work. You're trying to sort of get money from people, and so you beg, steal, and borrow to sort of. And again, that was only really ended up being a very small portion of the budget. We had very little budget for this film, and I think it's kind of in hindsight, it's the kind of the craziest film to try and make on a small budget with big crowd scenes. It was a lot to try and pull off, but that was.
We're incredibly grateful for everyone who contributed. Obviously, I mean, it was, just because it also, meant that you could see that there was resonance there. When people started to contribute to the Kickstarter fund, you could tell, okay, people are interested in seeing this story. So it's not just for funding, but it's also a barometer of figuring out if this is a story people are interested in hearing about. So yeah, Kickstarter has ups and downs, but it's incredibly useful, and we're very grateful for all the support we did get.
Absolutely.
I guess it sounds like a very obvious thing for me to say, not coming at this from a film creator's point of view, but that obviously then informs everything else that happens afterwards. So, I mean, how much did the budget that you were working with end up influencing what the film looked like at the very end?
Let you give one for that, Adam. See what you think.
It's hard to look. Sorry, go ahead. Matt contributed a lot of his own, funding to it, and also he bought like the camera that was used. So that's why it looks so incredibly good, is because he's invested in this incredible equipment. So, I mean, but obviously there are incredible limitations of small budget. So you have to rely on kindness of like rugby clubs, of extras, and of a lot of the actors to work for very little. So. You rely on a lot of goodwill, and it's you have to push a little harder, and everything becomes a bit more of a struggle. And there are times you think, how can we possibly pull this scene off with this? But and then you got a day where you bring in a rain machine, the most expensive day of shooting that we had, and you go, is it really worth it? And then you look at the movie later and you go, yeah. Mm-hmm. Wasn't raining that day at all.
We had with our other producer, we had lots of discussions of whether we needed the rain machine or not. I said we absolutely need it. I'm drawing a line in the sand. We're having the rain machine, and I'm so glad I stuck to my guns on that, because it is one of the more exciting sort of visually sort of interesting sort of sequences in the film. And when you put good things in front of the camera, you then got good things that you can shoot, and you can work a lot with that. Just having this sort of this torrential rain to shoot through was just it was beautiful. But it was always going to be a challenge. But I think from the start we knew that it was going to be a film that we had to shoot economically. And I said I have a lot of the equipment, and I've been playing around using it for years sort of in preparation for this film. So shooting various things, or trying stuff out. So I knew I had an aesthetic in my mind that I thought we could pull off on the budget that we had. But of course, we came up against many challenges throughout the shoot that was we didn't foresee. Every day there was some sort of emergency, or some sort of we've lost this location, or this isn't happening, or this actor can't do it today, and you have to constantly work around things. But that's low budget filmmaking. It's independent filmmaking, full stop, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the rain scene, because that's one of the clips that we're going to be showing a little bit later on. So we're going to come on to that. Don't worry too much. But I'm conscious we have a couple of other people, guests, to talk about this waiting in the wings. Let's throw to another clip, and then we'll welcome them in when we come back.
I didn't realise you lot spoke to us lowly mortals.
Well, we make exceptions for certain people.
Is that right? I'm honoured.
As you should be.
Yeah? Well, you certainly live up to the stereotype.
Devilishly handsome.
Full of yourselves.
I'm her.
Really? I didn't realise you raised bruised so easily. It must make things a bit impractical, no?
Do you even get bruised in the B team? Doesn't that involve taking some hits first?
You're a piece of work, you know that. Enjoy the rest of your night.
So that was a slightly different clip that we saw there from something that wasn't on the pitch, wasn't specifically rugby, but you did just see Alexander Lincoln in action, if I am to use the phrase there, who plays the main character, Mark. Alex, how are you getting on?
I'm good, thank you. Although I've just realised that I might be wearing exactly the same costume in the scene. So,
so that wasn't a deliberate
apologies
choice.
for that. Let's say that it.
Yes, sure, fair enough. We've also got Chris Sherwood with us, who plays the captain of the club featured in the film The South London Stags, Jimmy. Chris, how are you doing? Thank you for being with us.
Good evening. I'm very well, thank you. Yeah.
Good
Thanks
stuff.
for having us.
Well, in that clip that we just saw, we heard a little bit of chat about stereotypes, and that was one of the things that I really wanted to sort of hone in on, because we've just heard about Matt's background in rugby, we just heard about Adam's lack of a background in rugby. Alex, what was your perception of the sport, I guess, before making the film, and how did that play into how you decided to approach the character and his interactions with others?
It worked out really well. I used to play rugby about maybe 8 till about 18, because everyone got bigger than me. But it was a really amazing experience to sort of go the rugby world and training and stuff, which we did with the team, which was lovely, and captain for us, and we did a bit of training together, which was lovely as a chance to first family relationships with each other, but also to learn a bit more, because by the time we started filming.
Yeah, I'd imagine that was a bit like going back in at the deep end after quite a long time away, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was probably 6 years ish since I picked up a rugby ball, and I used to have a rugby on walks, and I wouldn't go anywhere without one. So it's a bit like second nature. I'm getting back into it and enjoying it with the rest of the team. So yeah, it was really, really lovely experience in that regard.
Good stuff. So when it came to your character in From the Side, then you could obviously relate to it in a way, and being out of the sport for a bit, coming back into it. Were you one of those A-team players when you were playing that was on sort of the other side of the relationship, the dynamics that we see?
You remember a very distinct sort of dynamic between the A and B squads. And when I first clubby in the UAE, and I came back in sort of year 8, and I was massive. And as a result, I was in the B squad for quite a bit of time. Everyone dropped out of the team. So then I got into the A squad pretty, to being big, I sort of carried on in that regard. But yeah, there was always a little bit of animosity. It was always with love, you know, with any hatred towards them, because it was always about getting into the A squad. You know, you did well enough in the B squad, you'd get to the A squad. But I remember that being a thing for sure.
So it's good to see that that's one thing Matt and Adam got right then when they were writing the films. How much did you lean on, I guess Matt maybe more so with his experience in rugby, for that sort of characterization of what a player would do in various situations?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't happen as much with asking for advice. What me and Alexander King, who plays Warren in the film, he experience, I'm sure Chris will agree with this, was that Matt was very much loose with the script, in that if you wanted to change certain things or try, and whether that was on the pitch or, you know, in other scenes with dialogue, it was a really, really nice sort of creative. Matt would steer you a little bit in his own way to what he thought, which was sort of annoying. But it was a really nice experience in that way, and working with Matt has been a...
Yeah. Well, I've just been asking Alex about how similar he is to the character. Chris, you're obviously the captain in the film. Do you see yourself as a leader, I was about to say in everyday life, but I guess specifically in a sporting context?
I mean, it's true that I've played a few sporting captains in my time. So it was interesting. I actually didn't audition for this part initially. I auditioned for, oh God, I'm forgetting the character's name, but the team bully, which I was never quite right for. But in doing that audition, Matt and Adam and Andrew, the other producer, obviously saw something in me, and they were like, no, this is not for you, but Jimmy. And I didn't even know Jimmy was up for grabs at that point. So I happily re-auditioned for Jimmy and was thrilled to get the part. I remember when I first saw this script, I was just over the moon that this script existed. And I, as an actor, I was desperate to be a part of it, because it's not often you see scripts that are so moving. I remember welling up when I first read it, but also that resonates so much with my own life. I grew up as a sportsman, and then I moved to London and started exploring my sexuality, and I was very much in the closet leading a double life. And I never felt comfortable going into sports teams where I didn't already know people. So I just stopped playing sport, and it left a big hole in my life. And then I discovered that gay sports teams exist, and I started off with the Gay Golf Society, and then Stonewall Football Club and Grace's Cricket Club. And suddenly my social network expanded enormously, and I found a cricket family and a football family and a golf family. So seeing this script was like, God, I wish this existed when I was younger. When I did come out, I remember someone saying to me, you can't be gay, you're too sporty. Such is the stereotypes that people hold. And it's understandable in a way that people hold these views, because people are not exposed to gay sportsmen. How many famous gay sportsmen are there? Not very many. So yeah, I think films like this are great to define not only larger cultural norms, but the norms within the gay film world as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm only now realizing, when you're listing off all of your different sports, which I noticed didn't include rugby, by the way, that I think I've come across your name before at Grace's. I never put the two and two together.
We've had a few emails before, Andrew. Yes. Okay,
fair enough. There you go. It's a small world after all.
Isn't it?
Well, you're just talking about stereotypes of being LGBT and being involved in sport. I believe one of the clips that we have kind of sums that up from a conversation that Alex's character and Pinky had in the film. Let's see if we can play that now.
I hated rugby in school. Did you know that? I was great at it, but I hated every second. Never thought I'd give it another go. Then I met all of you boys. It was like finding a family. Maybe being a stag meant nothing to you.
This isn't fair, Pink.
No, it isn't.
Look, I'm sorry, okay? The answer's no.
That for me was the standout scene of the film. I'm not going to shy away from that. I thought that was so incredibly powerful, knowing how many other people, like Chris was alluding to, would have felt the same at some point in their lives. Matt, I'm going to come to you first off the back of that, because I know, like we said before, you have lived that yourself. You've been a part of inclusive rugby clubs and yourself in the past. How much of a responsibility did you feel to sort of portray that properly, to do it realistically and not over glamorize it in the film?
Oh, I mean, it was enormous. Like, I felt the weight of, this world that I've been a part of, to sort of show this is the world. The whole world was going to see this world and this culture, and it had to be accurate. It had to be authentic, and it had to be real. And it was I constantly sort of skirting the line of, what can I change for dramatic purposes, and what do I have to really stick to my guns and be faithful? And this is how it really happens. And I think we struck a good balance with it. But I really wanted everything in the film, from the culture through to the rugby, to be as authentic as possible for someone who's involved with sort of rugby to watch that and go, God, this is exactly what it's like. So yeah, it was really important for me for it to be authentic. And as someone, you know, who came to sport later in life, I sort of, you know, give a lot of time to coach new people who've never played rugby before, to bring them into the sport, and to get people who maybe thought sport wasn't for them to give it a go again. Because I think it's quite a common theme, like Pinky says in the film, you know, especially sort of LGBT people in school probably had a bad time in sport and then get put off for life, and actually don't realize that sport is for everyone, and that actually sport can be more inclusive than maybe they realize, and that things like inclusive clubs exist. So, I mean, secretly in the back of my head, I thought if people watch this film and maybe they'll try, you know, get back into sport, not necessarily rugby, but any sport. But if it just kind of makes people realize that sport is kind of for everyone, that would make me really happy, and it was massively important to me.
Yeah, and it's a story I kind of alluded to before. I've heard that a lot through the work that I do. It often is inclusive clubs where people come back to. It isn't your, you know, I think the term usually used is mainstream clubs. I'm a bit hesitant whether that's the right term to use or not. But it really does highlight the importance of films like this to show that these places exist. And Chris, you were talking about coming on board with the film and how quickly you sort of jumped at the script. What sort of impact do you think this would have had for you when you were younger and still trying to find out if there was a space for you there?
Yeah, I think it would have been a source of great comfort for me as a sportsman. Sport was kind of my life growing up. And it just added to the sense that I needed to keep my sexuality a secret, I think, because I couldn't fathom what it would be like to come out. There were no models for me. So yeah, certainly for other gay sportsmen to see films like this will be of some comfort, because it's a way of saying to people that, you know, oh yeah, these guys are like me. We do exist. I'm not the only one. I could have said to that person who said to me, you're not gay, you're too sporty, I could have said, well, watch this film, you know. Interestingly, a young gay man who I vaguely know came up to me having seen this film, and he said, God, this had such an impact on me. I've grown up hating sport. I've never engaged in sport. And it's made me realize that it's not sport that I hate. It's the culture of sport. And I think I'm going to go and try an inclusive team. And that was really powerful to hear, and just resonated so much, not because that was what my life was like growing up, but I'm so aware of people who hated sport because of the culture around it, and the machismo, and how heterosexual it all is, and how it very easily makes outsiders of people. And the joy of playing in an inclusive sports team is that it is inclusive. And actually, certainly at Grace's Cricket Club and at Stonewall Football Club, we have a lot of straight players who come to us and just have such a great time playing sport, because they don't like the culture of their standard sports teams either. So it's as much about inclusivity as it is about sexuality that isn't necessarily there in mainstream sports teams.
Yeah. And having seen the real life side of that, I guess, with clubs like Grace's and Stonewall, and then having been part of this film, to have somebody come up to you and say it had that impact, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I can only imagine how proud you must have felt in that moment.
Yeah, and that's one example of many. I know Matt's getting contacted all the time by people on social media. So yeah, it warms the heart, absolutely.
We're just about to open that out to everybody else as well, to see if there are other examples of those sorts of stories. Matt, this sounds like you mentioned a few too.
Was that, sorry?
I was just about to ask if anybody else had similar stories to Chris, but from what you're saying there, you've got plenty to share.
I mean, not to sort of brag or anything, because it's just amazing. But I do sort of now get sort of essentially daily messages from people who watch the film. And, not just as sports people, but a lot of people saying, they want to consider giving sport a go. And for me, that's magical, and it's incredibly moving, like Chris said as well. Because that's sort of my journey. That's the kind of thing I spend a lot of time trying to encourage people to do that, and to hear that it's had that effect, and that it's changing hearts and minds is really good. And I think rugby is quite a unique sport in the sense that I think obviously every sport's different. rugby, I think, built into the culture is a level of respect that I think maybe other sports it's different in. And I think, you know, having the club I play for in Brighton Hove Sea Serpents, we have a lot of straight players who come, and actually it's almost about 50-50 now, because we've created a culture that's so attractive that, you know, it attracts, you know, also heterosexual kind of, you know, non-queer audience, you know, player base. And I think that's a testament to kind of, you know, the power of inclusive sport. But I think rugby itself, you know, I've played, you know, for 8 years in all around, you know, the country, all around the world in some parts, you know, and I've never really experienced homophobia on the pitch, which is, I mean, I think there's a stereotype that's something you must encounter every day. And that's definitely not true of all sports. I'm fully aware of that. And I think in some ways it's nice to sort of raise that rugby is a sport that is uncommonly welcoming among sports, and that, you know, inclusive clubs obviously have a very important purpose to get people into the sport who maybe felt that, you know, it's a bit too big of a step to kind of go into sort of a mainstream or traditional club. But actually, you know, that's once you've kind of built yourself up in the sport. I know so many sort of, you know, queer people who've kind of gone and played for their more local traditional club because they're just accepted they can be who they are. And you're finding a lot of sort of quote unquote sort of straight clubs who have now got such a large gay membership that they're registering in the sort of International Gay Rugby League to play in the sort of gay rugby leagues and things, because they've got so many players, and the straight players come along and be a part of that. And it is amazing. I mean, okay, I'm waffling now, but, you know, I feel very passionate about sort of rugby specifically as a sport, and the fact that it has this kind of effect that it can change people's lives. And, you know, I love it.
And you're absolutely right to talk about it as well, because we have seen that impact happen for a lot of different people at a lot of different clubs. Rugby being a great example. I know up here in Scotland, I think we've got just about more inclusive rugby clubs than any other sport. So, you know, it's a brilliant space for that to happen. And, you know, it is that welcome ground for a lot of people back into playing sport or to take it up for the first time. We have reached the point in the evening that we're going to go for a very quick break. But when we come back, we're going to talk more about the training that the likes of Alex and Chris had to go through, and maybe some of those club scenes that we saw a wee bit of in the clip as well.
Antonio, non sei più sposato. Prima di cercare l'amore, devi trovare te stesso, piano piano. E poi Antonio è bravissimo in cucina.
Ma che ne sai? Guarda che male.
Ad ogni modo, sta botta e via. Ti è piaciuto o no?
Hello again, everybody. That wasn't too long of a break at all. Hopefully you're still with us and enjoying the conversation. There's been a lot of different stuff that we've talked about so far. We mentioned a scene earlier on with rain and rugby. I think it's about time that we see that. Let's roll that clip.
Right, Captain, what you got? Well, I've got aggression, yeah? I've got hunger, and I've got your backs. I need you to have mine and each other's, yeah? Okay? Now, I didn't come all the way to Wales in this shitty fucking weather to see us not give anything less than 100%, okay? Yeah? No mercy, come on! Yes! Yeah! Come on! 3, 2, 1, yeah! Come on!
why Matt pushed for the rain machine and the effect that had there. Alex, I'm going to come to you first with this, because you mentioned the training that you did earlier on. How difficult was that training? You'd obviously played a bit of rugby before. Was it like starting from square one again, going back into it from the side?
Well, a little bit. I mean, we started with like running drills, and I was smoking quite heavily. But on the whole, the main difficulty was in terms of exercise, I guess. But that scene in particular, you just remember how fun it was, because it was freezing. But it was was so much fun, because you get to set up these sort of like set pieces and let the play sort of go on. But it was difficult to shoot, I can imagine. But I just love how sort of gladiatorial it all sport. We touched on it earlier, how there's not really a film like this, a narrative wise, and there's not many that show just how beautiful a game it is, and how visceral and brutal it looks as well. I've got off tangent, but yeah.
That's totally fine. I guess you would have been having flashbacks at times playing in those conditions. You must have come across something like that when you were younger.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always had lycra on, and Under Armour and stuff. I don't know if I'm misremembering. Matt might know, but I don't think I was wearing anything underneath. So it was lips and top, and it was January anyway, so it was particularly freezing. But again, I mean, it was so much fun with the whole team, because and Chris all these I can never remember the name every time I do this. Like those silver inexperienced blankets, they get you warm. Someone will know what I'm talking about. Anyway, we had between us, so we were sort of all huddling together, just trying to keep warm and hugging each other. A really awful experience, but it was really nice in terms of us sort of becoming a family and becoming a team and developing those relationships with each other.
And warming up together in the showers afterwards.
Yeah, a lot of that. Yeah.
I'm almost tempted to. No, okay. I'm not going to talk about the showers. Let's not go there. Chris, rugby was left off of the many sports that you did before. Did you know what you were getting into when you saw that?
I did used to play rugby at school, so I was quite familiar with the sport. It's just not a sport that I carried into my adulthood. But I always enjoyed it. You just can't do everything, and I guess I was a better footballer and cricketer than I was a rugby player. So and also I've got really cold hands at the best of time. That doesn't play well with rugby. So that day was savage for me. That was fun is not a word I use to describe it.
I guess that's the exact opposite of perfect cricketing conditions, isn't it?
Exactly.
So how did you find the actual sort of match sequences to do? Because you'd have been coming at it after a much longer break than the likes of Alex or even Matt, even though he wasn't in front of the camera for that. How was that to sort of jump in at the deep end, almost literally?
Yeah, I remember I had quite a bit of a shoulder injury at the time, so I was generally quite nervous about going into tackles. Thankfully, the big tackles were tightly choreographed, so it was all safely done. But my nervousness around it was just getting injured again, which I did so many times playing rugby before. So yeah, I was slightly nervous about that. And then the other thing was, because it wasn't actually a game of rugby, it was very stop start, and we were shooting in January and February, and it was absolutely freezing. Even without the rain machine, it was freezing. So it was just our energy was on staying warm as best we could. And I think the other thing that strikes me is the difference between how shit it looked in real life compared to how amazing it looks on screen. I think that was just, I couldn't believe it when I saw it,
Well, I was going to come to Matt and Adam next anyway to talk about the technical side of it. I have always heard that one of the most difficult things to put together in a movie is action sequences of sport. How did you find putting together those match scenes for In From the Side?
So, I mean, I've approached it from the fact that I think very few people in the audience will probably understand all the laws of rugby. So following any kind of meaningful gameplay is kind of pointless, and I think you bore an audience with that. So it was very much approaching it from a kind of we care about these characters, let's see the struggle they're going through, because I think through the biggest sort of collective struggle, you have the biggest sort of collective bond that you form at the end of it. And that was the narrative purpose of this, was that these characters are going through something that's immensely challenging, physically cold, brutal, and they're creating these family bonds through that. So it's very much about sort of showing the like smaller set pieces and showing the little slow. That's why a lot of it's in slow motion, just showing sort of we can see the emotions on their faces. But approaching it, so doing it in small set pieces. We have a couple of wide shots to kind of show that it is happening, but that way we can sort of set up lots of little moments where you can sort of experience the feeling of rugby more than actually just having to follow it as an actual sport or a game. But I knew that. I knew in my head how I wanted to play it out, and I sort of shot all the sort of angles I needed, and I knew in the edit, and the kind of music and all the sound effects, it would come together. But I agree with Chris. On the day, I can imagine how everyone thought, how is this going to look good? Because we have the rain machine gives you about a 10 by 10 meter patch of rain to work in, which is obviously quite limiting when you're trying to shoot a whole pitch of stuff. So you have to get creative, either shooting through that to create like a wall of it, or trying to constantly move around to make this match happen in this kind of very small square, essentially. Very small cold square of torture, essentially, because it's like this. I remember saying to the company that provided the water and the rain machine, is there any way we can heat this? And they said absolutely not, that's not possible. I think if even big Hollywood films, I don't think managed to do that. So I said, what can we do then? We can just provide as much warmth between takes as possible. But the rain was so cold, and yeah, so I felt very bad for putting the guys through that. But yeah. It was. I'm glad the way it came out. I think everyone hopefully will, when they see the final result, would say it was worth it.
It just seems quite unlucky then that when you were shooting in January, you didn't have rain anyway. It could very easily have been the case.
We had it was a beautiful day that day, and I was like, oh, can we just have it overcast just so it helps sell the we got about an hour or two of overcast where we shot, but there's bits where the sun's clearly out, and I'm having to sort of really work hard in the color grade to make it look like there's no sun there. But actually, it was quite a pleasant day. We had much colder days, apart from the rain day. But actually, that was a fairly mild weather-wise, but it felt very cold when the water was turned on, that's for sure.
And Adam, I'm conscious you've been there in the corner, not saying too much for the last wee while. Did you know what was going on when you were filming the rugby scenes?
Well, yes and no, because because it was again, it was a small budget film. It wasn't like I was probably just trying to corral extras, or I could be doing 1,000 different things on the set at the time. So Matt was shooting it. Matt was in charge of all the technical stuff and all the stuff going on in the field. Meanwhile there was tons of rugby extras in the clubhouse back there, and you have to get different people out at different times, and you have to make sure everyone's got kit ready. And so in terms of the shooting of the sequences themselves, it's all Matt. Then we've got the other, so it's all hands on deck when we were actually shooting the film. But I certainly had zero input into any of the technical stuff with the rugby games. Zero.
Sure, fair enough. I'm a little conscious of time, because I don't want to take up all of everybody's evenings, and I want to make sure we have the chance for a Q&A from people who've been watching. But I do want to make a point, and I guess, Matt, I'm coming back to you for this one. We saw that clip from the club earlier on, and a lot of the film is based around relationships off the pitch. It's not just about rugby, and it's about sex and love and stuff like that. How much of that, when you were talking earlier about getting the balance right between realism and dramatization, how much of that fell into the realism side of it? How much of that do you think was dramatized?
A sort of fair balance. I think there's obviously elements that are dramatized, but I know for sure that I've been around gay rugby for 8 years, and I've played for a number of clubs. I've played against a number of clubs. You hear stories from different things. the level of real drama that happens, in this world is phenomenal and unbelievable. So I don't actually, on reflection, the story that we should probably told isn't probably that dramatized. There's probably like way more dramatic things that really do happen. But I think it was important that we got the characterization and the realism behind the emotions of the story as authentic as possible. And these people felt like real people going through real, believable situations and exploring sort of things that, because essentially it's about these two characters who are both in dysfunctional relationships, who find each other and essentially have an adulterous affair. And that's obviously a very morally complex thing to try and explore, but something that's very rife. And, in the gay community, we open relationships, monogamy, it's a huge, big discussion point. And the things that we do behind closed doors, how much we tell our partners, the level of openness we have. It's I love that the film has promoted so much discussion around that. And I mean, a lot of controversy as well. Some people really don't like the fact that we're sort of, it looks like we might be glorifying these ideas, but I think we very much tried to present it all in a non-judgmental way, presenting them sort of from a neutral standpoint, objectively, and letting the audience decide whether they're going to root for these characters or whether they're going to hate them or not. And I think if we've done our job right, you get a bit of both. Essentially you're sympathizing with characters who are doing reprehensible things, but at the same time you're also not going, what they're doing is perfect. You sort of having equal level of condonement and condemnment, really. And I think and I hope we struck that balance. The audiences will tell us, I suppose, as they are. But it's in terms of balancing those things, I think we did a fairly good job of it, I hope.
And I will caveat this by saying I am not and never have been involved in a rugby club, but I have always heard plenty of stories about working hard and then playing hard. So you certainly got that aspect of it accurate, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I think I should probably start wrapping up my questions on this, and we'll go to our last clip and then come back with some questions from the audience, hopefully.
You got this!
I love that so much. That just reminds me of Chariots of Fire, that closing sequence towards the end. That's brilliant. Okay, Q&A time from our audience. And our first question comes from Daniel, who's watching on YouTube. Do you think the film would have had the same impact if the film was written as a heterosexual love story? I guess I should come to the writers for that one, because since it's a little bit about how it's written. Matt, Adam, any thoughts on there?
Adam, what do you think?
I guess from a writer's perspective, you want to think it would. But as two gay men writing a story set in the world of gay rugby who wanted to depict a realistic, reflection of what that sort of life is, it's actually a really hard question to answer. And I don't know if it would feel as authentic if it was about heterosexual. I don't know. I'd like to think yes. Matt?
I would say I've got a strong opinion on this. I think it's just a practicality of reality. If you have a heterosexual relationship on screen, it's always going to have a gender dynamic, which in a gay relationship is evened out because they're both men. And that's so in terms of the gender politics at play, that gives you a unique perspective where, there's also the fact that these two people can play on a sports team together. I mean, I can't really think of many sports that, have the intensity of rugby that you have that are mixed gender. So I think the uniqueness of this film comes from the fact it's a gay story, but the themes of adultery I think are applicable, but the situation only works, I think, in the environment that we wrote it in. And I think it'd be a very different story if you told it in a heteronormative kind of environment, because you're exploring many different themes, I think. And like I said, like gender politics essentially are going to be there. The differences between men and women are going to be there to be discussed and to be explored. And the fact that we don't have that is we're telling a different story essentially. I don't know, I'm waffling now again.
No, you answered Daniel's question. I'm 99% sure of it. Alex, I'm going to come to you with this next one, which is from Kyle from YouTube. Can the story have a happy ending? It seems like a lot of people like good endings. I don't know, would you say it was a happy ending for your character in this?
It very much depends on whose side you look at about this. And some people have been very much like, oh, well, it's not set in what I would call, I guess, like the fantasy of course. But what I'm saying is essentially is that I think the film is so realistic in that sometimes things do not work out. But at least if we look at Mark's character and his sort of arc, and it's something that me and Matt discussed, this idea that like Mark has no sort of in his relationship, like we know that financially he's not got all that, like his partners, and he sort of like is a passenger in his own life to a degree, at least with relationship. I think him realizing this aspect and looking past the lust and feelings, potentially even love, he's thinking about his own. He's thinking, I think, taking control of his own life and making a decision that is in which I think is sort of like the happiest ending that you can have. But I also understand that a lot of people together, Warren Mark to sort of go off into the sunset and for it to be lovely.
Sorry.
That was a spoiler alert, Alex.
Watching this. It's a hard question to answer. Sorry, Alex. I'm not sure how many people have. Is this? Are we assuming everyone who's watching this has seen the film?
I kind of am.
Okay.
Maybe they haven't. I don't know. But
okay.
Yeah,
they don't get together at the end. Or maybe they do.
I'd say it's interesting how many people have asked for a sequel where we retcon the ending, where we have a sequel where they do get together. And I think it's interesting how people sort of fall into two camps of going, the ending's perfect just the way it is, they shouldn't get together because there's so many red flags. And I personally fall under the category of, I think Warren has so many red flags and he has so many opportunities to do the right thing and he doesn't. So he doesn't really deserve to have Mark by the end. And I think Mark, does the right thing by himself, which is his arc, to have a self-fulfilling kind of arc. But some people really want that Hollywood ending and feel cheated that essentially that we don't let these two characters be together at the end, and to the point where they're demanding a sequel where we make that happen. And I just find that hilarious. That it's just like, it's the drive for and the desire for a Hollywood ending. And I sort of, like I said, a lot of sort of Q&As, I say this is a British movie, not a Hollywood movie, so that's why we have a. But I don't think it's a sad ending. I think it's a. Possibly a sad ending for Warren, maybe a tragic ending, maybe more. But I think in some ways that's what a lot of good myths and legends have, these kind of endings where characters who do bad things pay for them quite heavily in the end. But I think Mark gets a very nice ending at the end, and I think the team gets a good ending, and it's an uplifting final ending, even if maybe it's a bit of a roller coaster along the way.
It's absolutely a roller coaster along the way. That is 100% the way to describe it. I'm going to treat this next question as a bit of a quick fire one. I'm going to come to all of you individually. I just want one word of an answer because Jess Mark is asking, boxers, briefs, or jock straps? Alex, I'm going to come to you first.
It's for me.
Okay, Chris?
Very sensible briefs.
Adam?
Briefs.
Matt?
Jock strap? No, briefs.
Okay, I don't think we quite got a consensus, but we'll go with it.
Is it what we're wearing or what we prefer?
That was not specified in the question. So,
because I'm commando.
I'm trusting you'll answer that however you wanted to answer it. Clara asks, hi from Costa Rica, by the way. Where did you get the inspiration for the music? That rain scene really felt like a war zone. Matt, I'm going to have to come to you with this one because you created a lot of the music for this, if not all the music, right?
Pretty much all the music, apart from one or two tracks that some artists very kindly lent for the nightclub scenes. But yeah, it was an original score for this film, and it was a lot of work. I mean, it's kind of basically was my lockdown for about sort of 7 months, was just writing. I think it's an hour and 20 minutes of music, including sort of 2 or 3 original tracks as well, like songs that are on the actual soundtrack album as well. And it was a lot of work, but I think it was worth it. And it was nice. It was a unique thing to be able to write the music for your own film that you're directing and you're shooting. It gives you kind of a real authorship over the story that you're telling in a way that I think I may never get again. So I was very happy to put that work in for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine it was a very special moment for you to be able to have all of those different pots in the fire. We've got a question from somebody on Facebook now. I apologize if I totally mispronounced this, but it's David Fardmar, I believe, from Sweden, who also says hello from Sweden, and to Adam, because long time no see, apparently.
Ages, yeah. Hi, David. Okay. Nice to meet you.
David is a director and a casting director and is interested how the casting process went, and asks when he will get to see In From the Side in Sweden, because he hasn't been able to see it yet, unfortunately. Adam, Matt, I'm not sure who would be the best to go to here to talk about casting.
Either of us for casting, I guess. Matt, do you want to take casting?
Distribution in other countries is definitely an Adam thing, so that you can follow up with that one. What was the question? How did we cast this film? And we put out sort of a casting call for people with potential rugby experience for an LGBT film, and we were so lucky that so many people had some prior rugby experience. And we found Alexander Lincoln very early on, and it was important for us to sort of get the chemistry between both him and Warren, and actually the actor who plays Henry as well, because that's the kind of the second sort of love story really in the film, the unrequited love story of a character who's kind of in love with his best friend and it's not reciprocated. So we got Alex to come in to read against some of the other candidates for those roles, and basically we filmed it, watched them back, and looked at kind of the chemistry and yeah, that's how we cast Alexander King and Will Hurl as Henry, and all the rest of the cast as well. Chris, actually Chris is a great example of someone, like you said, he read for Gareth, the sort of the team bully originally, and I just wasn't quite feeling it. But when he had such a presence, I thought, is there any other role who would be great? And I thought, why don't we get him to read for Jimmy? And he came in and read one of the monologues that Jimmy does, and it was just like, that's it. And it also, when you're casting a big film with so many different characters, you want to try and look for different ways to differentiate people in terms of look. And obviously we don't have any other blonde characters as well, so it was even better. It's like, oh, it's perfect. Chris has a distinct look, he looks different. He's got sort of we've got a blonde character now, we've got this, and we're looking for regional accents as well, because many of the characters have different accents from across the UK, and that helps to differentiate all these different sort of teammates from each other. So it was a fun process, but it was very tough, on a low budget, with that many speaking roles. That's about 15 speaking roles that we had to cast for, and there was it was just me, Adam, and Andrew doing that essentially ourselves. We didn't have a casting director, so it was like many things, we were wearing many hats, and it was another tough process we had to go through.
I'm sure Chris will be delighted to hear that he has a distinct look. I'm sure that's the biggest compliment any actor can get. Adam, do you want to? Sorry, I'm just going to ask Adam to come in about potentially seeing it in Sweden. Do you want to respond to that briefly, Chris?
Oh, sorry, Chris.
No, you carry on.
Okay.
You carry on.
We'll just go with it. Adam, when can you see it in Sweden?
Well, hopefully soon. Look, we've sold it in so many different countries internationally. It's coming out in the States next year via Strand Releasing. It's played Australia. It's I'm trying to get the film as worldwide as possible. And to answer the question, I don't know yet, but we're working on it. And David, if we haven't sorted it out soon, just send me an email. I'll make sure you get to see it.
There you go. It pays to have contacts, doesn't it? It pays to have connections. That's always the way it works. I am kind of conscious of time at this point, so I think we're going to have to make this next one the last question. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions, and apologies to anybody who sent something in that we didn't get to put to our guests. But I think this is quite a nice one to end on as well, because again, I can come to all four of you. Darshan asks, if you guys could have one characteristic from any of the characters from the movie, what would it be? Chris, I mean, we kind of cut you off there. Do you want to come in on this one first?
If I could be as good looking as Alex and as funny as Pinky, I think life would be pretty good.
So, Alex, is this going to be the leadership skills of Jimmy now that you're going to say?
Well, it's going to have to be, isn't it? I wish I could be. I don't know. There's so much of every character. Mark in his sort of passiveness, but in his compassion, I sort of like it as well in some way. One particular emotion, or one particular characteristic. Personally, like the character of Henry the most. I don't know if that really answers the question, but Will's interpretation of it, I think he's a really interesting character, generally. So yeah, I'll stick with that.
Fair enough. I'm glad that we mentioned Henry towards the end of this, because I feel like I could have done 45 minutes, an hour of just asking you about Henry specifically. Unfortunately, we didn't quite have time for that. I feel like I should give Matt the last word with one of these questions. So Adam, what characteristic from any character would you like to have?
I'm going to go for Alice. Her world... What?
That's what I was going to say.
I love... Look, we've got to choose a female character. We've got to give a bit of love to Alice here. Her world-weary wisdom. There you go.
Matt, you just want to repeat the same thing?
I was going to say, if I could have anything, I'd love Alice's sass and passion for life and for embarrassing her son in the best way possible.
But surely, if the two of you wrote to that sass, surely you already have that sass.
Yeah, but to live that sass, to embody that on a day-to-day basis. I mean, Adam always does to a little, to some extent, but
Adam
to be full Alice all the time, one can only dream.
Fair enough. I think that is as good a place to end this as any, with a bit of laughter, because that is all that we've got time for, unfortunately, this evening. I'm going to say a huge thank you to Matt, Adam, Alex, and Chris for coming on, being a part of this. I have really enjoyed talking to all of you about it. I hope you've all enjoyed it as well. And we, of course, have to say a massive thank you to the BFI for supporting this series of Sofa Club, and to Verve Pictures for providing the clips that we've shown throughout the evening. Again, thank you if you sent in a question. Apologies if we didn't get to yours, but you'll have another chance to interact with stars of the screen next week when Sofa Club features the movie Swan Song. Your host for that will be Chris New from Weekend. He'll be chatting to the legendary Udo Kier and director Todd Stevens. Make sure you don't miss that. And until then, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Sofa Club about In From the Side. Goodbye and thank you.
Good evening. I'm Mr. Pat, and I'm back.
Good afternoon, residents. Lunch will be served in 5 minutes. Our special item of the day, fruit cocktail.
Miss Scott, you always had beautiful hair. Beautiful. Patrick Pitzenbarger. It's been years. I'm retired.
Rita Parker Sloan passed away. Rita specified that you do her hair and makeup for the funeral. The will makes a provision for services rendered.
My client demand high-quality beauty products.
What you looking for?
Perfect powder bleach and Vivante.
Baby, that smack don't stick to nappy heads. Oh my God, Pat, is it you? You look so athletic.
I'm surprised you still remember me.
Who could forget the Liberace of Sandusky?
I suppose to make a dead bitch look human.
Was she a handful?
Oh, a demanding Republican monster.
Sounds like a nightmare.
I adored her.
Holy hell, Pat.
You're still alive? I used to perform here.
Must have been before my time.
This place was family. Girl, you taught me everything I never wanted to know. Even though I never really knew you, I want you to know you changed my life.
Well, ain't you just the sweetest thing?
Hit me.
Slay, girl!